What's the dumbest rule you had to follow at home that landed everyone in the surgical room? I was making veggie tacos for dinner when my kids ran into the kitchen. Dad promised we'd go to McDonald's, they shouted. I sighed and shook my head. We've had McDonald's 4 times already this week. We're not going to eat that again. It's unhealthy, I said. But my husband cut me off immediately. Stop being so controlling. I'm the man of the house and we eat what we want. I tried to explain that the kids needed a balanced diet and home-cooked meals, not fast food every single day, but he just turned to them with a big smile. Mommy acts like she's such a smarty pants sometimes and keeps telling us what to do. But Daddy says you should eat what makes you happy. The kids cheered and hugged him tight while I stood there feeling like the enemy. You're not their friend. You're their father. We can't always do what they want, I reminded him. And you're not a nutritionist, he shot back. I'm tired of all your nagging about, oh, you can't have fried food again, or oh, don't give the kids candy. Give it a break, you little food dictator. Let me handle our meals from now on. I frowned, watching them go out to McDonald's for the 5th time this week and thought, fine. If he wanted to be in charge of food, he can have it all. So I stopped cooking, stopped suggesting we eat something healthier, stopped everything entirely. The first week was like a dream haven for them. Daily McDonald's runs, candies with every meal. My husband would come home with bags of fast food, holding it up and announcing it like he'd hunted and gathered for his family. He bragged to his coworkers about how peaceful his house was now that the food police had been disbanded, and they actually encouraged him with comments like, lucky man, and I wish my wife was that cool. He'd even show me those texts to prove his point. But by the second week, I noticed him starting to get winded just walking up our driveway. He'd pause at the doorway, pretending to fumble around for his house keys while he caught his breath. The kids struggled too. My son Elian was getting teased and left out in PE because he couldn't run without getting sick. My daughter Tori split her uniform pants and came home crying and embarrassed after her friends teased her about her weight and eating habits. Do you always scarf down food like that? Her best friend had asked during lunch in front of everyone. But when I tried suggesting maybe we go back to eating my balanced meals, my husband laughed. They're just growing. He bought them bigger uniforms and jackets to hide their growing bodies. Things only got worse. My husband fell over and injured his back after trying to tie his shoelaces. He was forced to switch to slip-ons just to go to work. He also got stuck in restaurant booths and started spilling into the seats beside him. Even our relatives started teasing them. At Thanksgiving, my husband reached over to refill his plate when his brother said, "Whoa there, that platter's for sharing, not for one person." Everyone burst out laughing, sharing twisted jokes about their weight. And while the kids looked embarrassed, my husband's response was the same to every humiliation. The world's not built for real-sized people. But it wasn't until the trampoline incident when they started to realize just how bad it's actually gotten. Tori's friend had a birthday party with a trampoline. And when Elian jumped on, a horrible ripping sound spread before the whole thing collapsed. 20 kids watched him fall through. That day, both my kids went over to my room and asked if I could secretly make them a veggie sandwich without their father knowing. And I did. I immediately started making them food and packing them healthy lunches and taking them out to the park to get some exercise. But on my husband's birthday, something completely turned things around. That Saturday, he brought us to a local steakhouse and signed up for the 72-ounce steak challenge. I gotta show everyone what a real man can do, he said. The kids looked uncomfortable. I watched him at the table halfway through the massive steak. His face was red and sweat was pouring down his forehead. A crowd had gathered and was cheering him on while I finally begged him, "Please stop. This is insane. Stop controlling me," he said through a mouthful of meat. Elian tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, please listen to Mom. This isn't good." But he still refused, glaring at his own child and saying, "Don't be a weak piece of crap like your mother." Tori started crying too. "Daddy, you look sick. Please stop eating. Can you all just shut up and let me do what I want? I'm the man of this family," he shouted. He continued eating just to prove his point. Then his eyes went wide. His hand went to his chest. The fork fell onto the plate with a clattering sound that made everyone stop cheering. He looked at the kids with pure terror before he collapsed face first into what was left of the steak. Tori screamed. Elian froze completely. The crowd scattered in a panic, calling 911. At the hospital, they put him through triple bypass surgery, saying that 90% of his arteries were blocked. But that wasn't even the worst thing they found. In his stomach was something so crazy, they almost named it after him. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and Tori sobbing and paramedics shouting numbers I didn't understand. Now I'm sitting in the hospital waiting room with both kids pressed against my sides. Elian has his face buried in my shoulder and won't look up. Tori keeps asking if Daddy is going to die, and I keep saying no, even though I have no idea if that's true. Nurses rush past us in the hallway talking in urgent voices about cardiac arrest and blocked arteries. A woman at the desk keeps glancing at us with this sad look on her face. The fluorescent lights make everything feel too bright and too real. My hands won't stop shaking. A surgeon in blue scrubs walks toward us, and I stand up so fast the kids almost fall over. He introduces himself, but I don't catch his name because my ears are ringing. He's holding a clipboard and his face is serious. He tells me my husband needs emergency triple bypass surgery right now. 90% of his arteries are blocked. He could die without immediate intervention. The surgeon hands me consent forms and a pen. I try to read the papers, but the words swim together. My hands shake so badly I can barely hold the pen. The kids watch me with these terrified faces. I sign everything. Line after line after line. The surgeon takes the forms back and tells me the surgery will take several hours. He walks away quickly. I pull the kids back down onto the plastic chairs. Tori asks what triple bypass means. I explain that the doctors need to fix Daddy's heart because it's very sick. Elian finally looks up at me and his eyes are red and swollen. I tell them both that Daddy is going to be okay. I say it with as much confidence as I can manage. But sitting there in that cold waiting room with my kids clinging to me, I'm not sure I believe it myself. Hours pass in that waiting room. The kids fall asleep against me. My legs go numb, but I don't move because I don't want to wake them. Finally, a woman in surgical scrubs approaches. She's older with gray hair pulled back tight. She introduces herself as Dr. Kara Watkins, the lead cardiac surgeon. She sits down across from us and I gently wake the kids. Dr. Watkins speaks clearly and directly. She tells us the bypass surgery was successful. They rerouted blood flow around the blocked arteries. But she looks right at me when she says the damage to his heart is significant. He'll need major lifestyle changes, long recovery period, cardiac rehabilitation. Then she pauses and says they found something unusual during the surgery. Something in his stomach. They had to remove it as part of the procedure. She explains it was a bezoar, a compacted mass of undigested material. This one was almost entirely red meat, the size of a softball. It had been sitting in his stomach for months, maybe longer. The surgical team was so surprised by the size and composition they're considering writing it up for a medical journal. I feel sick listening to this. Dr. Watkins looks directly at me again and says, family support will determine whether he survives the next 5 years. The way she says it makes it clear she's putting this on me, making sure I understand the responsibility. She stands up and tells us we can see him in a few hours once he's stable in the ICU. Then she walks away. The kids look at me with questions all over their faces, but I don't have answers yet. While we wait for the ICU to open for visitors, I sit there thinking back over the past few months, trying to figure out how we ended up here. It started with those veggie tacos. I was just trying to feed my family something healthy after 4 straight days of McDonald's. But my husband turned it into this huge power struggle. Told me I was controlling. Said he was the man of the house and he'd decide what we ate. The kids cheered him on like he was some kind of hero standing up to the villain. And I just stood there in my kitchen feeling like the enemy in my own home. He dismissed every concern I raised about nutrition. Called me a food dictator. Told his coworkers I was the food police and they all encouraged him. Sent him texts saying he was lucky and they wished their wives were cool like that. So I stopped fighting. Stopped cooking. Stopped suggesting healthier options. Just completely withdrew and let him take over all the meals. And he fed them McDonald's every single day. Sometimes twice a day. Bags of fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Candy with every meal. He'd come home holding up those greasy bags like he'd accomplished something great. The kids loved it at first. Thought it was the best thing ever. And I watched it happen. Watched them all gain weight. Watched my husband struggle to walk up our driveway. Watched Elian get teased at the school and Tori split her uniform pants. I tried to say something, but he shut me down every time. Bought bigger clothes to hide the problem. Made excuses. Blamed everything except his own choices. And now here we are, in a hospital, with him fighting for his life after collapsing face first into a giant steak. All because he had to prove he was the man of the house. I look over at Elian and Tori sitting in the ICU waiting area. They've stopped crying, but now they're just silent. Staring at nothing. Switching between anger and guilt and fear. I can see it all playing across their faces. Tori suddenly whispers that this is her fault. She says she kept asking for McDonald's. Kept begging Daddy to take them. If she hadn't wanted it so much, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Elian nods and says he should have listened when I warned them about eating healthy. He says he made fun of the veggie sandwiches I tried to pack. Called them gross. Chose the chicken nuggets instead. I pull them both close against me. Tell them this is not their fault. Not even a little bit. Grown-ups make the decisions. Daddy made bad choices about food. Really bad choices. But we're all going to help him get better now. We're going to be a team. Tori asks if Daddy is going to die. I tell her the doctors fixed his heart, and now we need to help him stay healthy. Elian asks if we have to eat McDonald's anymore. I shake my head and say no, we're done with that. We're going to eat real food at home. Food that makes our bodies strong. Tori starts crying again, but this time it's different. Like she's relieved. Like she's been waiting for permission to stop. I hold them both and we sit there together in that awful waiting room with its flickering lights and smell of disinfectant, waiting to see if their father is going to survive. My phone starts buzzing in my pocket. I pull it out and see a flood of text messages. Relatives asking what happened. Friends wanting details. My husband's brother sends a message that makes my blood boil. It says, guess those steak challenges finally caught up with him, LOL. 3 laughing emojis. I stare at that message feeling rage build in my chest. I type back that this isn't funny. We need support, not jokes right now. He responds with another laughing emoji and says he's just keeping it real. I turn off all my notifications except for immediate family. More calls start coming in. Aunts and uncles and cousins, people we barely talk to suddenly very interested in the drama. I answer a few and keep my responses short and factual. Yes, he had a heart attack. Yes, he's in surgery. No, I don't know more details yet. They all make comments about his weight, about how they saw this coming, about how he should have listened to me. Like they're suddenly on my side after months of encouraging his behavior. After laughing at Thanksgiving when he filled his plate 3 times. After sending him texts saying I was too controlling. Now they want to act concerned and caring. I stop answering the calls. Put my phone on silent. The kids don't need to hear me dealing with this right now. They don't need to know their uncle thinks this is funny, that their relatives are treating this like gossip instead of a real crisis. A nurse finally approaches and says we can see him for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. She leads us down a hallway and through double doors into the ICU. The smell hits me first. Antiseptic and something else I can't identify. We walk past other rooms with other patients. Machines beeping everywhere. The nurse stops at a room and gestures for us to go in. I see him before the kids do. Lying in the bed with tubes coming out of his arms and chest and nose. Machines all around him beeping and flashing numbers. His face is pale and puffy. Swollen in a way that doesn't look like him. The kids freeze in the doorway. I take their hands and pull them forward gently. We stand beside the bed. His chest rises and falls, but it's the ventilator doing the work. I feel all my anger dissolve into something else. Pure fear. This man who was shouting at me in a steakhouse yesterday now looks so small and helpless. The kids are crying again. I reach out and take his hand. It's cold and limp. I tell him he needs to fight. Needs to come back to us. The kids need their father. I need him. Despite everything he's put us through these past months, despite the fighting and the stubbornness and the terrible choices, I realize I still love him. I still want him to survive this. I want him to get better and be the man I married. The man who used to care about our family's well-being. The nurse touches my shoulder and says our time is up. I squeeze his hand one more time. Tell him we'll be back soon. The kids each touch his arm gently. Then we walk back out into the hallway, and the door closes behind us. A woman in business clothes catches me in the hallway as we're heading back to the waiting room. She introduces herself as the hospital billing coordinator. She has a folder in her hands and a sympathetic expression on her face. She explains that even with our insurance, we're looking at significant out-of-pocket costs. The surgery alone is expensive. Then there's the hospital stay, the cardiac rehabilitation program he'll need after, the medications, the follow-up appointments. She estimates we'll owe at least $30,000 over time, maybe more depending on how long his recovery takes. My stomach drops. She says my husband will need to take disability leave from work for at least 2 months, possibly longer. I do the math in my head. Disability pays 60% of his normal salary. We were already living paycheck to paycheck before this happened. I feel panic rising in my chest. How are we going to pay our mortgage, our car payments, the kids' school expenses? Now add $30,000 in medical bills on top of everything else. The coordinator is still talking about payment plans and financial assistance programs, but I can barely hear her over the roaring in my ears. She hands me some paperwork and tells me to fill it out when I have time. I take the papers with numb hands. She walks away. I stand there in the hallway trying to breathe, trying not to completely fall apart in front of my kids. This is going to destroy us financially. Even if he survives, even if he recovers, we're going to be drowning in debt for years. Dr. Watkins comes back several hours later with a full post-surgery report. She sits down with us in a small consultation room. The kids are half asleep, but I want them to hear this. She explains that the triple bypass went well overall. His heart is pumping adequately now. The blood flow has been restored. But then she starts talking about the Bezor again. She pulls out photos on her tablet. I don't want to look, but I can't help it. The mass they removed from his stomach is huge and dark and compacted. It looks almost solid, like a ball of clay. She explains it was almost entirely undigested red meat, compressed together over months of excessive meat consumption. The stomach acid couldn't break it down fast enough. It just kept accumulating, getting bigger and harder. The surgical team was shocked when they found it. She says they've seen Bezors before, but never one this large or this composition. Usually they're made of fiber or hair. This was pure meat. They're considering writing it up for a medical journal, possibly naming the condition after him if they publish. She swipes through more photos showing different angles. I feel sick looking at it. That thing was sitting in his stomach while he kept eating more and more meat, while he did that steak challenge, while he refused to listen to any warnings about his diet. Dr. Watkins puts the tablet away and looks at me seriously. She says this is a warning sign we can't ignore. His body was literally unable to process the amount of meat he was consuming. This has to change, or he won't survive another year. Doctor. Watkins asks if she can talk to the kids privately for a few minutes. I'm hesitant, but she insists it's important they understand what happened. She brings Elian and Tori into a small consultation room. I follow and sit in the corner. She has a plastic model of a heart on the table. She picks it up and shows them how a healthy heart works. Blood flows through these vessels called arteries. But when you eat too much bad food, the arteries get clogged up, like a pipe getting blocked with gunk. She points to the model showing where the blockages were in their father's heart. 90% blocked. Almost completely shut off. The heart couldn't get enough blood. That's why he collapsed. She explains in simple terms that their dad's body couldn't handle all that meat and grease anymore. It made him very sick. Tori asks in a small voice if they're going to get sick too. Dr. Watkins doesn't sugarcoat it. She says honestly that they're heading in that direction. But they're young. Their bodies can still recover if they change their eating habits now. If they start eating vegetables and fruits and healthy foods. If they stop eating fast food every day. Elian asks how long it takes to get better. She says it depends on the person, but their bodies will start feeling better within weeks if they make good choices. She emphasizes that this isn't about being skinny or looking a certain way. It's about being healthy enough to run and play and live a long life. The kids both nod seriously. I can see them actually understanding for the first time. This isn't mom being controlling. This is real. This is life or death. On the second day, my husband finally wakes up. The nurse comes to get us and we rush to his room. He's groggy and confused. The ventilator tube is out, but he has an oxygen mask on. His first words are asking what happened. Did he finish the steak challenge? I stare at him in disbelief. That's his first question. Not how are the kids. Not am I okay. Whether he finished eating the giant steak. I explain as calmly as I can that he collapsed. Had a heart attack. Needed emergency triple bypass surgery. He blinks slowly, trying to process this. Then he says it must have been bad luck. Maybe the steak was spoiled. The restaurant should have checked their meat better. I feel anger flaring up again. I tell him about the 90% blockage. About the bezoar they removed from his stomach. The ball of undigested meat the size of a softball. He shakes his head and says that doesn't make sense. He's always eaten meat. His whole life. This must be something else. Some genetic problem. Maybe the doctors made a mistake. I can't believe what I'm hearing. He's lying in a hospital bed after nearly dying, and he still won't admit that his choices caused this. Still blaming everything except himself. The restaurant, his genetics, the doctors, anyone but him. Elian speaks up from beside me and says the doctor told them it was from eating too much bad food. My husband looks at his son and says, doctors don't know everything. They just want to blame people for being happy. Tori starts crying. I take both kids by the hands and walk out of the room. I can't listen to this anymore. Can't watch him lie to himself and to them. The nurse follows us out and gently suggests we give him time to process everything. But I know the truth. Time won't change anything. He's going to fight this every step of the way. The next morning, a man in scrubs walks into the room carrying a thick folder and introduces himself as Rhett Watkins from the hospital nutrition department. He spreads printed charts and meal plans across the bed tray, pointing to lists of approved foods with portion sizes measured in cups and ounces. Grilled chicken breast 4 ounces, steamed broccoli 1 cup, brown rice ½ cup. He goes through each category explaining what my husband can and cannot eat, emphasizing lean proteins and lots of vegetables while avoiding anything fried or processed. My husband scrolls through his phone, barely glancing at the colorful charts. Rhett asks if he understands the plan, and my husband waves his hand without looking up. Rhett leans forward and says firmly that following this plan isn't optional if he wants to avoid another heart attack, pulling out statistics about patients who ignore dietary advice. My husband mutters that he'll figure it out at home. I sit there watching this interaction and feel my exhaustion deepen because I recognize this pattern so clearly. The nurse told us earlier that morning we could take the kids to the cafeteria for lunch since my husband would be sleeping most of the day anyway. We ride the elevator down 3 floors and walk through the automatic doors into a bright space that smells like coffee and disinfectant. The kids head straight for the hot food line out of pure habit, reaching for chicken nuggets and French fries without thinking. But then both of them pause with their hands hovering over the serving utensils. Tori pulls her hand back and picks up a red apple from the fruit basket instead, turning it over in her palm like she's never seen one before. Elian grabs his usual turkey sandwich but then adds a small container of salad with ranch dressing on the side. I watch this happen and feel something loosen in my chest. They sit down at a table near the window and I tell them I'm proud of their choices, keeping my voice casual and light so it doesn't feel like a huge deal. They both look at me with small smiles and Tori bites into her apple with an audible crunch. This is the first time in months they've chosen something healthy without me forcing them or sneaking it to them behind their father's back. It's a tiny victory, but it feels significant. Later that afternoon, Rhett comes back to schedule cardiac rehab appointments, and my husband immediately waves him off. He says he'll just walk around the block at home for exercise, that he doesn't need some fancy program. Rhett explains patiently that cardiac rehab is supervised therapy with trained staff who monitor his heart rate and blood pressure, adjusting his activity level to keep him safe while he builds strength. My husband crosses his arms and says he doesn't need babysitting. I sit in the chair by the window watching this interaction and feel exhausted all over again. This is the same stubborn refusal to accept help that got us into this mess in the first place. The same insistence that he knows better than the professionals. The same pattern repeating itself less than 48 hours after he nearly died. That evening, after the kids fall asleep in the waiting room chairs, my husband asks me to stop at McDonald's on the way home from the hospital tomorrow. I look at him for a long moment and then tell him clearly and calmly that I won't be buying fast food anymore. He starts to argue, but I cut him off before he can build momentum. I say I'll cook healthy meals at home and he can make his own choices about what he eats, but I'm not going to help him kill himself. The kids are awake now, watching this exchange with wide eyes. My husband opens his mouth to respond and then closes it again. For the first time since this whole thing started, he doesn't have a comeback. 2 days later, I'm at home sorting through mail when my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. A woman introduces herself as Davina Murphy, the school counselor, and says she needs to meet with me about the bullying Elian and Tori have been experiencing related to their weight. She explains that she's noticed both kids withdrawing socially over the past few weeks, and Elian has been skipping PE class with complaints of stomach aches. She wants to create a support plan to help them. I schedule a meeting for next week and thank her multiple times before hanging up. It feels good to know that someone at the school is paying attention and actually wants to help instead of just calling it kids being kids. The meeting happens on a Tuesday afternoon in Davina's small office with motivational posters on the walls. She sits across from me with a yellow legal pad and outlines a plan that includes modified PE activities for Elian, while he builds his stamina back up, regular lunch check-ins with both kids to make sure they're eating and feeling okay, and a conversation with students in their classes about body respect and kindness. She also suggests that the school nurse monitor their progress and provide encouragement as they work on building healthier habits. She's creating a whole support system that extends beyond just our family. I leave that meeting feeling validated and relieved that we have allies helping the kids navigate this difficult transition. When I get home, there are 3 large boxes sitting on the front porch. I open them to find care packages from my husband's coworkers filled with candy bars, bags of chips, cookies, and processed snacks. The cards attached say things like, "Get well soon, buddy," and "Thinking of you." I thank them politely through text, but carry all the boxes straight to the garage and stack them in the corner behind the recycling bins. Then I send a group text to all the coworkers explaining that we're focusing on healthy foods during my husband's recovery and asking them not to send any more junk food. Some of them respond with understanding messages and heart emojis. Others send back laughing faces and comments about me being no fun. One guy writes, "Wow, someone's serious," with a string of eye roll emojis. The responses make me angry, but I don't engage any further. A few days later, Rhett calls my cell phone to follow up on how things are going at home. During the conversation, he mentions that the hospital has a family therapy program for patients recovering from cardiac events, because the stress of a health crisis often reveals underlying relationship issues that need to be addressed. I'm skeptical about therapy in general, but I agree to try one session because we need all the help we can get if we're going to survive this as a family. He emails me information about a therapist named Suresh Newman, who specializes in health crises and family dynamics. That same afternoon, I walk past the bedroom and hear my husband on the phone with one of his friends. His voice carries through the half-open door as he brags about almost dying doing the 72-ounce challenge like a boss. He's laughing and making jokes about the whole thing, calling it just a little heart thing and saying the doctors overreacted. I stand in the hallway listening to him minimize the surgery that saved his life and feel anger surge through me mixed with fear. He hasn't learned anything from this. Not a single thing. When he hangs up, I walk into the room and tell him that if he's not taking this seriously, then I need to protect myself and the kids from watching him die. He looks startled, like he didn't realize I was listening. That night, I make veggie tacos for dinner, the same meal that started this whole nightmare months ago, when he took control of our family's eating habits. I set the table without saying anything and call the kids down. They come running and start building their tacos with actual enthusiasm, telling their dad about which toppings they're choosing and why. My husband sits at the head of the table in cold silence, picking at his food with his fork, but he does eat it. He cleans his whole plate without complaining out loud. I consider that a small win, even though the tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a knife. The next morning, I drive my husband to his first cardiac rehab appointment, and he complains the entire way there about how this is a waste of time when he could just walk around the block at home. I keep my hands on the steering wheel and don't respond, because arguing won't change anything. The facility is in a medical building attached to the hospital with clean white walls and professional-looking equipment visible through the glass doors. We check in at the front desk, and a nurse named Serenity Clay comes out to greet us with a clipboard and a friendly but no-nonsense expression on her face. She takes us back to the rehab area where treadmills and exercise bikes are set up with monitors and emergency equipment nearby. My husband reluctantly changes into workout clothes in a small locker room while I sit in the waiting area watching other cardiac patients doing their exercises at various stations. Serenity attaches monitor leads to my husband's chest and explains the program requirements in a firm voice that doesn't leave room for negotiation. He gets on the treadmill with obvious reluctance and she starts it at a very slow walking pace. Within 2 minutes, I can see sweat forming on his forehead and his breathing getting heavier. He looks genuinely surprised by how quickly he gets winded from something as simple as slow walking. His face turns red and he grips the handrails tighter than necessary. 10 minutes into the session, my husband clutches his chest with one hand and tells Serenity something feels wrong. She immediately hits the emergency stop button, and 2 other staff members rush over to check his vitals. They take his blood pressure and pulse while asking him questions about the pain and where exactly he feels it. I stand up from my chair in the waiting area with my heart pounding, but force myself to stay calm and not rush over. After several tense minutes, Serenity explains that it's minor muscle pain from the surgery rather than a new heart problem. The scare visibly shakes my husband, and his bravado cracks just a little as he sits on the edge of the treadmill looking pale and scared. Serenity sits down next to him and explains in a patient but firm tone that this is exactly why supervised rehab is necessary. She tells him they can tell the difference between normal recovery pain and actual cardiac events, and that trying to exercise at home without monitoring could be dangerous or even deadly. My husband nods slowly and doesn't argue back for once. I watch his face change from defensive to genuinely frightened, and realize the scare might have actually reached him in a way my warnings never could. That evening, we sit down at the kitchen table with our bank statements and bills spread out in front of us, trying to figure out how we're going to manage on disability payments that are 60% of his normal salary. The numbers don't add up no matter how many times I recalculate them. We'll need to cut our cable service completely, reduce our phone plans to the cheapest option, stop eating out entirely, and delay some credit card payments just to cover the basics. The stress of it all makes us both snappy and short-tempered with each other. I suggest he could sell his expensive gaming system and his whole collection of games to help with immediate bills. He gets defensive immediately and says that's his only hobby and the one thing he has for himself. I point out calmly that keeping the house and feeding our kids matters more than video games right now. He sits there in angry silence for a long minute before finally agreeing it's necessary. We spend another hour going through every expense and cutting everything that isn't essential. By the end of the night, we've created a bare-bones budget that might just barely work if nothing else goes wrong. The next day, I take the kids grocery shopping and turn it into a teaching moment about reading nutrition labels and comparing products. We stand in the cereal aisle and I show them how to look at the sugar content per serving. Elian picks up his favorite cereal and reads the label with his finger following the numbers. His eyes go wide when he discovers it has more sugar than a candy bar. Tori grabs a box of frozen meals she usually likes for lunch and is shocked by how much sodium is packed into each serving. I explain what sodium does to your body and why too much is bad for your heart, without lecturing or making them feel guilty about past choices. We spend extra time in the produce section letting them pick vegetables they're willing to try eating. Elian chooses colorful bell peppers in red and yellow because he likes how bright they look. Tori picks snap peas because she remembers eating them raw at a friend's house once and liking the crunch. I grab hummus for them to dip the vegetables in and explain that it's made from chickpeas and is full of protein and fiber. The kids seem genuinely interested instead of resistant, and they help me load the cart with fresh produce and lean proteins. I let them each pick one small treat as a reward for being good sports about the healthy shopping. Our first family therapy session with Suresh Neumann happens 3 days later, and the awkwardness is thick from the moment we walk into his office. My husband sits in his chair with his arms crossed over his chest and barely participates in the conversation. Suresh asks open-ended questions about our family dynamics and how we communicate about health and food choices. I try to answer honestly while my husband just shrugs or gives one-word responses. Suresh gently points out the control dynamics in our relationship and notes that my husband used food as a power move, while I responded by completely withdrawing from the situation. My husband deflects immediately and says I was being controlling about what everyone ate and treating him like a child. Suresh acknowledges that both patterns were unhealthy, but explains that the current crisis requires new approaches from everyone. He asks my husband directly what food represented to him growing up, and why he reacted so strongly to my suggestions about healthy eating. My husband shifts in his seat uncomfortably and doesn't answer. Suresh doesn't push, but makes a note on his pad and says we'll explore that more in future sessions. The hour feels like 3 hours, and we leave without making much progress, but at least we showed up. Rhett schedules a follow-up dietitian appointment the following week, and has the kids create a visual meal plan with pictures of foods they like that are also healthy. He gives them magazines and printed photos to cut out and paste onto a poster board. Elian gets excited about making his own smoothies with fruit and yogurt, and cuts out pictures of strawberries and bananas and blueberries. Tori wants to learn to cook simple stir-fries with lots of vegetables, and finds photos of colorful peppers and broccoli and snap peas. Rhett encourages their enthusiasm and writes down recipes they can try at home. My husband sits through this session looking bored and non-committal. He checks his phone several times and only half listens to what Rhett is explaining about portion sizes and meal timing. I feel frustration building in my chest, but try to stay focused on the kids' enthusiasm instead of my husband's resistance. The kids tape their meal plans to the refrigerator when we get home, and Elian asks if we can make smoothies for breakfast tomorrow. Elian goes back to PE class with his new accommodations, which include modified activities and permission to take breaks without having to explain why. He comes home that afternoon practically bouncing with excitement because he was able to participate in a relay race at his own pace and didn't get sick or teased. The PE teacher let him walk fast instead of run and positioned him as the anchor leg so he wouldn't hold up his team. His team actually won, and the other kids high-fived him and celebrated together. The teacher pulled him aside after class to praise his effort and tell him she was proud of how hard he tried. I can see Elian's confidence starting to rebuild just a little bit as he tells me the whole story with animated hand gestures. He asks if he can go to the park after homework to practice walking fast, so he can maybe try jogging next week. That weekend, Tori and I go for a walk around the neighborhood together while my husband stays home with Elian. We make it 2 blocks before Tori complains that her knees hurt and asks if we can stop. I validate her feelings instead of pushing her to continue, and we sit on a bench at the corner park. I tell her that bodies need time to adjust to new activities and that it's okay to go slow. She admits she's embarrassed about not being able to keep up with her friends during recess when they run around playing tag. I share that I struggle with exercise too, and that it's hard for me to stay motivated sometimes. We sit there together watching other kids play, and I make it feel less like a personal failure and more like something we're working on together as a team. Tori leans against my shoulder and says she's glad I understand. We walk back home slowly and stop twice more to rest. The next week, my husband tries to pressure me to stop at a drive-thru on the way home from his rehab appointment. He says he deserves a treat for doing all the exercises and working so hard. I refuse calmly but firmly and remind him about what Dr. Watkins said about his arteries and his damaged heart. I offer to make him a satisfying meal at home instead with the ingredients we bought at the grocery store. He sulks the rest of the drive home and won't talk to me or look in my direction. When we get home, he goes straight to the bedroom and closes the door. I start helping the kids with their homework at the kitchen table. About 20 minutes later, I hear him on his phone in the bedroom talking in a low voice. I don't think much of it until a delivery driver knocks on our door an hour later with a bag from a burger place. The delivery arrives while I'm still helping the kids with their math worksheets and spelling words. My husband takes the bag and eats the greasy burger and fries in the living room while watching television. I don't say anything because arguing will just make things worse. Within an hour, he's in the bathroom with stomach distress and I can hear him groaning and clearly in pain through the closed door. The kids hear everything too because our house is small and the bathroom is right off the hallway. Tori starts crying and saying she doesn't want Daddy to die. Elian looks toward the bathroom with something like disgust on his face instead of concern. I pull Tori close and try to comfort her while listening to my husband suffer the consequences of his choice. I realize this might be the wake-up call that actually reaches all of them in a way my words never could. I finish helping the kids with their homework and get them ready for bed. Tori hugs me extra tight and asks if Daddy is going to be okay. I tell her yes, even though I'm not sure anymore. Elian brushes his teeth without being asked and goes straight to his room. I tuck them both in and wait until I hear their breathing get slow and steady. My husband is still in the bedroom with the door closed. I grab my keys and go outside to my car in the driveway. I sit in the driver's seat and lock the doors. Then I let myself cry. I'm so angry at him for ordering that burger after everything we've been through. I'm scared he's going to die and leave me alone with 2 kids who just watched their father almost kill himself. I'm mad that I have to be the grown-up while he acts like a child who can't control himself. The tears come hard and I have to cover my mouth so the neighbors don't hear. I think about what happens if he dies. I think about raising Elian and Tori by myself. I think about the medical bills and the mortgage and everything else. But sitting here falling apart won't help anyone. I wipe my eyes with my sleeve and take some deep breaths. I have to stay calm. I have to stay steady. No matter what he does, I have to keep going for the kids. 3 days later, we have the follow-up appointment with Dr. Watkins at the hospital. My husband complains the whole drive there about having to take time off work. We sit in the exam room and wait. Dr. Watkins comes in with a folder full of papers and test results. She reviews his blood work and checks his heart with her stethoscope. Everything sounds okay for now. Then she pulls out some printed images and spreads them on the table. She points to dark spots and blocked areas on pictures of his heart. She looks right at him and speaks in a clear, firm voice. If you keep eating like you did before, you will die within 5 years. Maybe sooner. The bypass surgery bought you time, but it didn't fix the real problem. Your heart is damaged. These arteries can block up again if you don't change. She shows him another image with arrows pointing to the worst areas. Do you want to see your kids graduate high school? Do you want to walk your daughter down the aisle someday? Because the choices you make right now decide if that happens. My husband sits there looking pale and shocked. His mouth opens, but nothing comes out. Dr. Watkins puts the images back in the folder and hands him a card for a support group. She tells him to think hard about what matters most. We leave the office in silence. That weekend, my husband's brother shows up at our house unannounced. He walks in carrying a 6-pack of beer and immediately starts making jokes. He sees the vegetables I'm chopping for dinner and laughs. Look at all this rabbit food. You guys eating like bunnies now? He pulls out his phone and shows my husband some pictures from the hospital. Remember when you were in that gown with your butt hanging out? Classic. He's laughing hard and slapping his knee. My husband looks uncomfortable but doesn't say anything. His brother keeps going. Man, they got you on the heart-healthy diet now. That's rough. No more real food for you. I put down my knife and turn to face him. Those jokes aren't helpful right now. If you can't be supportive, then you should leave. His brother stops laughing and looks surprised. My husband's eyes go wide. There's a long, awkward silence where nobody moves. Then his brother clears his throat and mumbles an apology. He changes the subject and asks about work instead. The rest of the visit is tense, but at least he stops making fun of us. On Monday morning, my phone rings while I'm doing laundry. It's Davina from the school. She tells me she wanted to check in about how the kids are doing. She says both Elian and Tori are handling the peer comments much better now. Elian found a group of friends who eat lunch with him and don't care what he brings. They talk about video games and sports instead of food. Tori has been working with the school counselor twice a week on positive self-talk. When someone says something mean, She has tools now to handle it. Davina says the bullying hasn't stopped completely, but it's better. The kids have strategies and they're using them. I thank her and tell her how much the school's help means to our family. I hang up feeling grateful in a way I didn't expect. It helps to know we're not dealing with this alone. On Wednesday, we have our second session with Suresh. We sit in his office with the soft chairs and the tissues on the table. Suresh asks my husband about his childhood and what food meant to him growing up. My husband is quiet for a long time. Then he starts talking about being poor as a kid. He describes being hungry a lot and having free lunch tickets at the school. The other kids would tease him about it. He talks about wearing clothes that were too small because his parents couldn't afford new ones. He says he promised himself that when he had his own family, they would never feel that way. They would never be hungry or feel poor or left out. Suresh listens carefully and then helps him see how he mixed up having plenty of food with showing love. How he thought controlling meals meant he was providing and being a good father. My husband's voice cracks when he talks about wanting to give his kids everything he didn't have. I feel my anger start to soften into something else. I'm starting to understand even though I'm not excusing what he did. Then Suresh turns to me. He says gently that my approach to food before everything happened sometimes came across as judging instead of working together. I feel defensive at first, but then I think about it. I admit that I lectured everyone instead of including them in decisions. My tone probably made my husband feel attacked, like I was saying he was a bad father. Suresh talks about how we can change the way we think about healthy eating. Make it about caring for each other and having choices instead of rules and being told what to do. I agree to try a different way. It's hard to admit I made mistakes too, but I know he's right. That evening we sit down as a family at the kitchen table. We have paper and markers and everyone gets to help make agreements about food. The kids are excited to have input. We write down things that are non-negotiable like no fast food during the week and vegetables with every dinner. But we also add flexibility like pizza on Friday nights and treats on weekends. Tori draws pictures of her favorite healthy foods. Elian makes a chart showing different meals we can rotate through the week. My husband sits there looking skeptical, but he agrees to try the plan for 1 month. If it works, we keep going. If it doesn't, we talk about it and adjust. Everyone signs the paper and we hang it on the fridge. A few days later, Tori comes into the kitchen holding a cardboard box. She looks confused and hurt. She asks me if Daddy is lying about trying to be healthy. I look in the box and see candy bars and bags of chips. She tells me she found it in the garage tucked behind the tools. My first reaction is pure anger. I want to march into the living room and yell at him. But I take a breath and think about what Suresh said. I decide we need to handle this as a family. The kids deserve honesty about what's happening. I tell Tori to keep the box and we'll talk about it together at dinner. That evening, I call a family meeting. We all sit at the table and Tori puts the box in the middle. My husband's face turns red when he sees it. He looks embarrassed and angry at the same time. Elian stares at his father and speaks in a quiet voice. He says he's scared. He doesn't want his dad to die. He needs him to try harder. My husband starts to say something defensive. His mouth opens and I can see him getting ready to make excuses or get mad. But then he stops himself. He closes his mouth and just sits there. The silence stretches out for what feels like forever. Then he apologizes. His voice is shaky and the words come out slow. He admits he's struggling with cravings. He feels like a failure. He hid the food because he was ashamed. This is the first time since the hospital that he's been completely honest with us. Tori starts crying. I reach over and hold her hand. My husband looks at both kids and promises to do better. It's not perfect, but it's real. A week later, Rhett calls my husband and invites him to a group class at the hospital for cardiac patients. My husband doesn't want to go, but I convince him it might help. We drive there on Tuesday evening. The class is in a conference room with about 15 people sitting in a circle. They go around sharing their stories. A man who looks about my husband's age talks about his near-death experience. He describes having a second heart attack 2 years after his first one. He missed his daughter's wedding because he was in the hospital. His voice breaks when he talks about seeing the photos later and knowing he wasn't there. He tells everyone that he thought he had more time. He thought he could cheat the system. But the heart doesn't care about excuses. I watch my husband's face while the man talks. He's actually listening. His usual defensive expression is gone. On the drive home, he's quiet and thoughtful. Then he asks me questions about the meal plan for the first time. Real questions about what he can eat and how to make it taste good. Not arguments or complaints, just questions. I answer them carefully and we talk the whole way home. When we get home that night, I pull out our bank statements and medical bills and spread them across the kitchen table. My husband sits down across from me looking tired and we start adding up numbers. His disability payments are 60% of his normal salary, and the medical bills keep arriving in the mail every few days. We owe the hospital $30,000 even after insurance, and the minimum monthly payment is $500 that we don't have. I write down all our regular bills and subtract them from his reduced income and there's almost nothing left over. He stares at the numbers and his face goes pale. I suggest we need to cut cable and reduce our phone plans and stop eating out completely. He nods, but it's still not enough to cover everything. Then I bring up his gaming system and collection sitting in the basement. He bought the setup 3 years ago and spent thousands on games and controllers and a special chair. His jaw tightens and I can see him wanting to argue, but instead he just sits there quiet. Finally, he says we can sell it. His voice sounds defeated, and I know this hurts him because gaming was his way to relax after work. But he admits out loud that keeping our family safe matters more than his hobby. We spend the next hour taking photos of everything and writing descriptions and posting them online. Within 2 days, people start messaging with offers, and by the end of the week, we've sold almost everything for enough to cover 2 months of minimum payments. The relief I feel is physical, like I can breathe deeper for the first time since the hospital. On Saturday morning, I see a flyer for a community walk event at the local park, and I think maybe this could help make exercise feel less like punishment. I tell the kids we're going, and they seem excited about the idea of walking with other families. My husband overhears and says he'll come too, but he's just going to watch. We drive to the park, and there are maybe 50 people gathered near the starting line with numbers pinned to their shirts. The kids and I sign up for the 1-mile loop, and my husband finds a bench near the path. I watch him sit down heavily and pull out his phone. We start walking with the crowd, and Elian keeps pace beside me while Tori skips ahead a little. About halfway through the loop, we pass my husband's bench, and I glance over at him. He's not looking at his phone anymore. He's watching the families walking together with this expression on his face that makes my chest hurt. It's longing mixed with embarrassment, and I can see him wanting to be out here with us, but feeling too ashamed of how out of shape he is. Other dads are walking with their kids and laughing, and he's sitting alone on a bench. When we finish the loop and come back to him, he asks how it was, and Elian says it was fun. My husband nods and looks away, and I realize he's fighting with himself about his limitations in a way he hasn't before. 2 days later, my phone rings while I'm making dinner, and it's Serenity from cardiac rehab. She tells me my husband missed his last 2 appointments, and she's calling to follow up. Her voice is firm but not mean, and she explains that missing sessions will slow his recovery and increase his risk of another cardiac event. I feel anger rise in my chest because he told me he went to both appointments. Serenity says she needs to speak with him directly, so I hand him the phone. He takes it looking guilty and walks into the other room. I can hear her talking through the wall, and she's not accepting his excuses about being busy or tired. She tells him that inconsistent attendance means he's not taking his recovery seriously, and that his heart doesn't care about his excuses. Then she schedules his next 3 sessions right there on the phone while he's still talking to her, so he can't avoid committing. When he hangs up, his face is red, but he writes the appointments on the calendar without arguing. Over the next 2 weeks, he doesn't miss a single session, and I realize something important. He responds better to external accountability from medical professionals than to me reminding him at home. When I nag him, he sees it as control, but when Serenity or the doctors tell him the same things, he actually listens. I decide to try a different approach with meals, and one evening I sit down with my husband and ask him to choose one satisfying meal per week that he wants me to cook. I tell him it needs to be something he really enjoys, but we'll make it with healthier ingredients. He thinks for a minute and then says, spaghetti and meatballs. I suggest we use lean ground turkey instead of beef and whole wheat pasta, and add vegetables to the sauce. He looks skeptical but agrees to try it. The next day, we go grocery shopping together for the first time in months. He pushes the cart while I pick out ingredients and explain why each choice is better. We get the ground turkey, and he holds the package reading the label. In the produce section, I let him pick which vegetables to add, and he chooses mushrooms and bell peppers. Back home, we start cooking, and he stands at the counter chopping the vegetables slowly. It's awkward because he's never really cooked before, and he cuts the peppers into uneven pieces. But he's trying, and I can see him taking ownership of the process, instead of just complaining about what I serve. When we sit down to eat, the kids say it tastes good, and my husband admits it's pretty close to the regular version. He even goes back for seconds, which surprises me. The school has a fall festival the following weekend with game booths and food stands set up in the parking lot. I pack a small cooler with apple slices and string cheese and crackers for the kids. We walk around looking at everything, and Elian wants to play the ring toss while Tori heads for the face painting booth. After an hour, they both ask if they can get something from the food stands. I tell them they can each pick one treat and to choose carefully. Elian walks up and down looking at all the options before picking a small cotton candy. Tori gets a caramel apple that's bigger than her hand. They sit on a bench eating slowly and looking happy. I notice they're not scarfing the food down or hiding it or acting guilty. They're just enjoying their treats like normal kids. A mom I recognize from Tori's class comes over and comments on how good the caramel apple looks. Another parent says something about the kids making healthy choices most of the time. I just smile and nod without making it into a teaching moment or bragging about our progress. I want this to feel normal for them, not like some big accomplishment that puts pressure on them. Late that night, after everyone's asleep, I sit at my computer and open a private browser window. I type in separation and divorce and start reading articles about custody arrangements. I'm not planning to leave right now, but I need to know my options if my husband keeps sabotaging his health. The articles talk about joint custody and child support and dividing assets. I read about how courts decide custody based on the best interest of the children. Then I look up the financial side and see that I'd need money for a lawyer and deposits on a new place. I open our bank account and look at the balance and know I can't afford to leave right now even if I wanted to. So I start making a plan. I print out copies of our important documents like marriage certificate and the kids' birth certificates and our tax returns. I hide them in a folder in my car. Then I open a separate savings account at a different bank and transfer $50 from our joint account. It's not much, but it's a start. I tell myself this isn't a decision yet. It's just preparation. Having a plan makes me feel less trapped and more in control of my future. If my husband continues refusing to take care of himself, then I need to be ready to protect myself and the kids. 3 days later, I'm at my computer again when my husband comes home early from work. He walks into the office and I quickly close the browser, but I'm not fast enough. He sees the divorce lawyer website on the screen before it disappears. His face goes white and then red, and he asks what I'm looking at. I take a breath and decide to be honest. I tell him I've been researching separation options. He starts to get defensive and then stops himself. Instead, he asks quietly if I'm leaving him. His voice is shaking and all the usual bravado is gone. I tell him honestly that I don't know. I can't watch him slowly kill himself and traumatize our kids in the process. If he's not going to take his recovery seriously, then I need to think about protecting Elian and Tori and myself. He sits down hard in the desk chair and puts his face in his hands. Then he starts crying actual tears, not just watery eyes. He says he's terrified of losing his family. He admits he's been scared every single day since waking up in the hospital. He's scared of dying and scared of changing and scared of failing at recovery. This is the first time since the heart attack that he's been completely honest and vulnerable with me. I sit there watching him cry and feel my anger mixing with sadness. Part of me wants to comfort him, and part of me thinks he should have been honest weeks ago instead of hiding snacks and lying about rehab. We stay up until 2 a.m. having the hardest conversation of our marriage. I tell him I need him to agree to a clear separation of control, where I make the health decisions for our family. His role needs to be specific and measurable, not just promises to try harder. He needs to attend every single rehab appointment without excuses. He needs to follow the meal plan we created together and not hide food or order delivery behind my back. He needs to keep going to therapy with Suresh and actually participate instead of sitting there with his arms crossed. I tell him if he can't do those things, then I need to protect the kids and myself by leaving. He's crying and nodding and saying he understands. I get a piece of paper and write down each specific commitment. Attend all cardiac rehab sessions 3 times per week. Take medications daily at scheduled times. Follow meal plan with no hidden food or secret orders. Attend therapy weekly and participate honestly. Walk together as a family 4 evenings per week. I write my own commitments too. Lead meal planning and preparation with his input. Support his recovery without nagging or criticism. Communicate concerns directly instead of withdrawing. We both sign the paper and I put it on the refrigerator where we'll see it every day. It feels real and binding like a contract, and I think maybe this is what we needed all along. Over the next 2 weeks, we work on building a routine that actually feels doable. My husband sets alarms on his phone for his medications and takes them at the same time every morning and evening. He goes to cardiac rehab on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday without missing once. After dinner, we put on our shoes and walk around the neighborhood together as a family. Some nights, he only makes it 2 blocks before getting tired, but he does it. There are slip-ups where he eats too much at dinner or says he's too tired for the walk. But instead of fighting about it, I just write it in a notebook we keep on the counter. The next day, we look at what happened and figure out how to adjust. Maybe he needs a bigger lunch so he's not as hungry at dinner. Maybe we need to walk earlier before he gets too tired. The kids watch us working together instead of screaming at each other, and I can see them relaxing. Tori stops looking scared every time we sit down to eat. Elian starts talking more at dinner instead of staying quiet and tense. At the follow-up lab appointment the next week, we sit in Dr. Watkins' office waiting for results. She comes in with papers in her hand and actually smiles, which is something I haven't seen from her before. She tells my husband his cholesterol numbers have dropped significantly from where they were right after surgery. His bad cholesterol is down almost 40 points, and his good cholesterol is up. His blood pressure is in a healthier range too. She says if he maintains this trajectory, he's significantly reduced his risk of another cardiac event. My husband sits up straighter and asks how much he's reduced the risk. She explains it's hard to give exact numbers, but following his current plan could add years to his life. He looks genuinely proud of himself for the first time since this whole thing started. She schedules his next appointment for 3 months out instead of 1 month and says that's a good sign. On the drive home, he's quiet, but I can tell he's processing what she said. I realize the doctor's encouragement means more to him than anything I could say. He needs to hear from medical professionals that his efforts are working, not just from his wife, who he sees as nagging him. The next week, I schedule checkups for both kids with their pediatrician to see how the changes are affecting them. Elian goes first and steps on the scale looking nervous, but the doctor pulls up his chart and smiles. She tells him his weight hasn't dropped much yet, but that's actually good because kids shouldn't lose weight too fast. What matters more is that his energy is better, and he's eating vegetables and whole grains now instead of fast food every day. She measures his blood pressure, and it's come down from the borderline high reading 3 months ago. Elian asks if he's doing okay, and she tells him he's doing great. That slow and steady wins the race. Tori's appointment is similar, with the doctor praising her for making healthier choices and noting that her stamina has improved based on what the PE teacher reported. Both kids leave the office looking relieved instead of ashamed, and I realize how much pressure they've been carrying about their bodies. The pediatrician pulls me aside and says to keep focusing on health and energy rather than weight loss, especially with kids, because that's what builds sustainable habits. I thank her and feel validated that our approach is working, even if the changes aren't dramatic or fast. That evening, my husband asks to talk to me privately after the kids go to bed. We sit in the living room and he looks uncomfortable, fidgeting with his hands. He tells me he's been thinking about what he said at the steakhouse and he needs to apologize. He says calling me controlling was wrong and telling Elian not to be weak like me was cruel and unfair. He admits that I was trying to protect our family, and he turned it into a power struggle because of his own issues about feeling like he wasn't in charge. The apology is awkward, and he stumbles over his words, but I can tell he means it. I tell him I forgive him, but that rebuilding trust takes time and consistent action, not just words. He nods and says he understands, and we sit there in silence for a minute before he reaches over and squeezes my hand. It's not a perfect moment, but it feels real, and that matters more than perfect. A few days later, some of his coworkers stop by the house to visit and check on him. I answer the door expecting them to have bags of chips and candy like last time, but instead they're holding a fruit basket and flowers. My husband comes to the door and actually tells them before they come in that we're not keeping junk food in the house anymore because he's serious about his recovery. They look surprised but respect it, coming inside and asking genuine questions about cardiac rehab and how he's feeling. One of them mentions that his own dad had a heart attack last year and asks what the rehab exercises are like. My husband talks honestly about how hard it is and how scared he was. No jokes or deflection, just real conversation. I watch from the kitchen while making coffee and see him sitting forward engaged in the discussion, and he looks almost proud talking about the work he's doing. His coworkers stay for an hour, and when they leave, they tell him they're glad he's taking care of himself and to let them know if he needs anything. After they go, he looks at me and says, "That felt better than making jokes and pretending everything was fine." Thanksgiving arrives, and we host dinner with extended family, including my husband's brother, who made all those weight jokes before. We set up the table with turkey and sides, and everyone fills their plates. My husband takes reasonable portions and loads up on vegetables, and I see his brother watching. His brother opens his mouth and makes a comment about portion sizes looking small, clearly setting up for another joke. Before I can say anything, my husband cuts him off firmly. He tells his brother that jokes about his health aren't funny anymore, and he'd appreciate support instead of teasing. The room goes quiet, and his brother looks shocked, mumbling an apology. Elian reaches over and squeezes his dad's hand under the table, and Tori smiles at him. I feel something shift in our family dynamic, like we're finally on the same team instead of divided. The rest of dinner is pleasant, and his brother actually asks respectful questions about the recovery process. The next Saturday afternoon is beautiful, so we pack up and head to the park. The kids run ahead to the playground while my husband and I find a bench. Elian goes straight to the track and starts running, and I hold my breath watching him. He makes it around the entire lap without stopping and comes back grinning and proud, not even that winded. Tori climbs all over the playground equipment without checking if her clothes are going to rip or if other kids are staring, just enjoying herself like a normal kid. My husband and I sit on the bench watching them play, and he reaches for my hand. We sit there together holding hands and feeling something like hope for the first time in months. It's not that everything is perfect or fixed, but we can see actual progress, and that makes me believe we might actually make it through this. Our third therapy session with Suresh comes around, and we talk about the control versus care dynamic again. Suresh suggests we set a shared cooking goal where my husband prepares 1 meal per week with my support. He explains that collaboration builds trust and gives my husband agency while keeping the family on track with health. My husband actually engages in the conversation instead of sitting there defensive and closed off. He asks questions about how to plan a meal and what ingredients to use. Suresh gives us homework assignments to plan the first meal together and shop for it as a team. We leave the session, and my husband seems energized instead of drained, talking in the car about what he might want to cook. I suggest starting with something simple, and he agrees, deciding on chicken and vegetable stir-fry. We shop for ingredients that week, and he reads recipes online to prepare. Saturday evening comes, and he takes over the kitchen while I supervise from the counter. He chops vegetables carefully and cooks the chicken in the wok, adding sauce and seasoning. The meal ends up oversalted and slightly burned in spots, but the kids eat it anyway and praise him for trying. I add soy sauce to mine without commenting on the mistakes. He looks embarrassed but also proud that he completed something, and after dinner we sit down and talk about what he'd do differently next time. He says he'd use less salt and cook on lower heat, treating it like a learning experience rather than a failure. I tell him I'm proud of him for trying, and he actually smiles. 3 months after the surgery, we go back for the surgical follow-up with Dr. Watkins. She reviews his test results and latest scans, then looks up at us with obvious satisfaction. She tells my husband she's clearing him to return to light-duty work because his recovery is going well. She reiterates that he's not cured and will need to maintain these changes permanently, and that backsliding could be fatal. But she's encouraged by his commitment and the progress he's made. My husband asks intelligent questions about long-term management and what warning signs to watch for. I can see he's actually engaged with his own health in a way he wasn't before the crisis. Dr. Watkins schedules his next appointment for 6 months out instead of 3 months, which she says is a good sign. My husband's first day back at work arrives, and I'm nervous for both of us. I pack him a healthy lunch with grilled chicken salad, fruit, and nuts to avoid the temptation of vending machines. He kisses me goodbye and heads out looking both excited and scared. Around noon, his coworkers take him out to celebrate his return at a restaurant near their office. He texts me a photo of his meal, a big salad with grilled salmon, while his coworkers have burgers and fries around him. The text says they're giving him a hard time, but he's holding the line. I respond with encouragement and a heart emoji, feeling like we're finally on the same team instead of fighting each other. He comes home that evening tired but happy, saying it felt good to be back at work and useful again. Late one night, about a week later, I wake up and realize my husband isn't in bed. I check my phone and see it's past midnight. My phone rings and it's him, his voice shaky. He tells me he's sitting in the McDonald's parking lot near our house looking at the lit-up menu. He says the craving hit him hard and he drove here before he really thought about it. I take a breath and talk him through it without judgment, reminding him about how far he's come and asking if the temporary satisfaction is worth risking everything. He sits quiet on the phone for a minute, then says he's turning the car around. 20 minutes later, he walks through the front door and we go to the kitchen together. I make popcorn and we settle on the couch to watch a movie. He tells me that calling instead of giving in felt like a real victory, that he almost ordered but stopped himself and reached out instead. I tell him I'm proud of him, and that's what progress looks like. Not perfection, but better choices when it counts. The next week, we start something that becomes our new Thursday tradition. I set out bowls of diced tomatoes, shredded lettuce, black beans, grilled chicken strips, cheese and salsa on the counter, and the kids come running when they smell the taco shells warming in the oven. My husband stands at the cutting board chopping peppers and onions, moving slowly but deliberately, and when Tori asks if she can help, he hands her the grater for the cheese. Elian sets the table without being asked and fills everyone's water glasses, and we all gather around the counter to build our tacos together. My husband adds extra vegetables to his and skips the cheese, making choices without me having to say anything, and the kids pile their plates high with colorful ingredients they actually want to eat. We sit down together and Tori announces that Thursday taco night is her favorite dinner now, better than McDonald's ever was, and Elian agrees between big bites of his creation. My husband reaches over and squeezes my hand across the table, a silent acknowledgement that we're doing this together now, and mealtimes feel cooperative instead of like a battle I'm fighting alone. The tacos become our symbol of the new normal we're building, where healthy eating is something we choose as a family, rather than something I force on everyone while they resent me for it. One evening a few weeks later, I sit on the back porch after the kids go to bed and let myself think about how far we've actually come since the steakhouse. My husband still struggles with cravings and gets defensive sometimes when I suggest we skip dessert, and I still feel angry when I remember him calling me controlling and telling Elian not to be weak like me. The kids have hard days too, when Tori comes home upset about comments on her lunch choices, or Elian feels frustrated that he's still slower than his friends in PE. We're not some perfect family now where everything is fixed and everyone is happy all the time. But the explosive fights are fewer, the communication is better than it was, and we're all genuinely trying instead of working against each other. That feels like enough for now. Like progress that might actually stick instead of some dramatic transformation that falls apart the first time things get difficult. The next weekend, we set up systems to help us maintain what we've built instead of sliding backward. I buy a big pill organizer and fill it with my husband's medications for the whole week, labeling each day clearly so he can't forget or skip doses. We print out his cardiac rehab schedule and post it on the fridge with magnets, right next to the meal plan chart the kids helped design. Then we sit down as a family and go over the warning signs of cardiac distress, making sure Elian and Tori know what to watch for and what to do if their dad has chest pain or trouble breathing. We practice the steps together, with the kids taking turns calling 911 on a disconnected phone and describing the emergency clearly. It's scary to talk about, and Tori gets teary imagining something happening to her dad again, but we push through the discomfort because being prepared feels better than being helpless. My husband adds the emergency numbers to everyone's phones and shows the kids where he keeps his medication list and insurance cards. The safety net we build together gives me confidence that these changes can last long-term, that we have structures in place to catch us if anyone starts to slip. 4 months after my husband collapsed face first into that massive steak, our family sits down to dinner together on a regular Tuesday night. I look around the table and feel something I haven't felt in a long time, a mix of genuine relief and cautious optimism about our future. My husband is consistently attending cardiac rehab 3 times a week and seeing his therapist every other week, taking real ownership of his recovery instead of fighting against it. His latest test results show his cholesterol dropping and his blood pressure in a healthy range. And Dr. Watkins said his heart function is improving steadily. He's actually engaged in family meal planning now, suggesting recipes and helping cook instead of undermining everything I try to do. The kids are healthier and more confident, eating balanced meals without shame or rebellion, and they've completely stopped asking for McDonald's or begging for fast food. Elian made it through a whole PE class yesterday without getting winded, and Tori wore her favorite jeans that fit comfortably again. We're eating at home together almost every night, with my boundaries finally respected, and my role as the person who keeps us healthy acknowledged instead of mocked. The road ahead still requires constant effort and vigilance, and I know we'll have setbacks and hard days ahead. But we've built sustainable routines and honest communication, and all 4 of us are in genuinely better places than we were before the crisis. Life isn't perfect and probably never will be, but we're facing the challenges together as a team instead of as enemies, and that feels like the kind of progress that can actually last.